The promise was that DOGE would seek out waste and fraud and cut them out of the government. And the promise was that this would save at least $1, possibly even $2 trillion in the process. And the promise was that it would achieve all of this because it was being led by one of the most successful and effective business leaders on the planet, a man who could work miracles.
The chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
And anyone who criticised, well, they were said to be defending waste and fraud, somehow implied that they must be personally benefiting from such activity, because clearly the activity itself was beyond criticism. No need to hold power to account here whatsoever. Well, it turned out that DOGE was a personal disaster for Elon Musk. The political platform it gave him has damaged, probably fatally, although it will take years to play out, the companies that he heads, especially Tesla. It turned out that DOGE was a probable disaster for government integrity, as it compromised data and systems in ways that may take years to unpick. And DOGE was a disaster for government effectiveness, as people were terminated who were actually part of the capacity of the government to do essential jobs. And it turned out DOGE was particularly a disaster in meeting its stated objectives. From $2 trillion, it's now claiming a mere $150 billion in saving, and the thing is, even that figure seems to be completely made up. Indeed, the final tally may even be that DOGE cost more money than it saved. So let's have a look. First, let it be said that cutting waste and fraud is a valid and indeed a noble aim for a government to embrace. It's often not a particularly easy thing to do. Otherwise, governments would always be doing it and using all the money that they save for things that will get them credit with their electorates. But it's worth the attempt. And the idea of having a task force of skilled practitioners using some of the latest artificial intelligence tools to spot problems, there's a lot to be said for it in principle. Sounds like the sort of approach that might be able to tackle an admittedly difficult job, or at least put a new spin on it. Unfortunately, it's not even remotely a description of the car crash that seems to have unfolded around government in the last couple of months, with Elon Musk and a group of young tech bros roaming the corridors of power, demanding access to databases and systems, shutting down programs that had titles with the wrong keywords in them, and pushing people to resign their jobs without much care as to whether they were actually needed or not. This is something that apparently Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was very aware of and pointed out to Musk when they had a shouting match in the White House earlier this week. Bessent was said to have derided the DOGE operation in a row that was apparently within earshot of the president. That shows how things have shifted, because a couple of months ago, Trump was basically pushing his cabinet members to accept Elon Musk as readily as they accepted him himself. While Trump is still saying nice things about Musk when asked by journalists, that ironclad bond has clearly been weakened, probably because DOGE has caused a lot of pushback, a lot of controversy, and it appears not to have delivered. Some of the radical but somewhat random layoffs have failed to save money in the short term, but also possibly reduced the ability of a government to bring money in the medium term. So, for instance, firing a bunch of the people who are responsible for collecting taxes. 32,000 of them, to be precise. That has been seized on by a lot of people who are deciding this might be a great time not to pay tax or to claim deductions for which they're not eligible, because they're assuming that auditors won't be examining their accounts anytime soon while they're so short-staffed. Last month, the Treasury Department and Inland Revenue Service officials predicted a decrease of more than 10% in tax receipts, equivalent to more than $500 billion in lost revenue. In other words, significantly more than DOGE is claiming to have saved. Ironically, an increase, not a decrease, in fraud nationwide. Add to that the extra cost that when you lay off a bunch of people and then realise you made a mistake and you need to rehire them again, which wouldn't be that big a problem, except there seem to have been rather a lot of mistakes, and it does start to add up. Max Stier, chief executive of the Partnership for Public Service, said that all of the firings could cost the government over $135 billion when taking into account lost productivity, paid leave, and some rehirings. And then when you simply ban people from spending money without any kind of process to work out what will be the impact of that, it can also end up costing you more. So one small example to illustrate the point. DOGE cancelled almost 500,000 government credit cards, meaning that managers in many regional offices simply couldn't buy basic supplies. So, for example, one scientist took a month to get authorization to buy $200 worth of dry ice needed to preserve samples. Normally, they would just get the dry ice from a local supermarket. In this case, a colleague from a different regional office who still had one of these rare functioning cards bought the dry ice, and then it had to be shipped to where it was needed at an additional cost of $100. Multiply that example by numerous items and 500,000 credit cards. Another example, a new $500,000 piece of equipment had been sitting idle for months because scientists aren't allowed to schedule training sessions with the vendor to enable them to start using the machine. Sounds like the opposite of cutting waste, you might think. Oh, and don't forget to add in the cost of lawsuits, which have inevitably followed the total chaos with its impact on the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Jessica Rydell, a fellow with the Manhattan Institute, told Reuters, DOGE is not a serious exercise, and she estimated it only saved $5 billion to date and would likely cost more than it has saved. Now, that hasn't stopped small numbers of apparent but often fake examples of what DOGE is supposed to have found being shared over and over again on social media. The repetition is key, reinforces the idea amongst the easily manipulable and the loyal that the savings are real and they are substantial. Like this one, shared in a tweet by the famously sober and serious representative, Marjorie Taylor Greene, representing that 11 million dead people have been cleared off Social Security, stopping, quote, an incredible amount of fraud, and also stopping election fraud. Amazing work, she says, by DOGE. Except, of course, it's a complete hallucination at best. What they're doing is clearing up an old database. There is no evidence whatsoever to suggest those 11 million people were getting Social Security checks. And also, of course, the voter rolls don't come from Social Security, so there's no impact on any of this on elections, fraudulent or otherwise. But that has been pointed out many times, and it doesn't stop the claim being repeated and repeated, because the people sharing it are either willfully blind to the many people pointing out their mistake, or they know it and they're spreading it anyway, in which case it stops being a mistake, it becomes a lie. But this is the point. The mythology of DOGE is what is exclusively shared within the MAGA echo chamber. Obviously, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent isn't fooled, but he's not allowed to say so externally. And reportedly, when he said so directly to Musk, Musk called him an agent of George Soros, which is what happens when you're so infected with, shall we call it, the anti-woke mind virus, that you fail to see reality, you can only see conspiracies, which is something Musk is becoming known for. All those people demonstrating against Tesla in their showrooms, well, he says they're so well organised. Clearly, they're all being paid by the far left forces of darkness, George Soros at least. Definitely not a bunch of people who, are just sort of pissed off at the actions of Chairman Elon. Well, he can make stuff up about the people that have been reacting against Tesla because of its association with him and Doge, but what he can't hide from are the numbers. So in its first quarter results of 2025, Tesla reported that its profits have plunged by 71% from a 20% decline in overall sales. The protests worldwide certainly hurt. But the point is that the associated boycott of Tesla among the very people who previously would have been most likely to be loyal customers, that is hurting a great deal more. This, along with the unrelenting criticism he has been getting for his, let's face it, obnoxious political campaigning, has led him to announce that he will be devoting much more time to Tesla and less time to Doge. Will it make any difference? I mean, if it's the association between Tesla and Elon Musk that's the biggest problem for the Tesla brand, well, perhaps they'd be better off if he just sort of resigned, stood down, sold his shares, moved on. Wedbush securities analyst Dan Ives told Axios the brand damage caused by Musk in the White House / Doge over the last few months will not go away. Ironically, that damage has reduced Musk's net worth by a breathtaking $122 billion this year. If he'd not done Doge, but had simply cashed those shares in and given the proceeds to the government, he probably would have benefited the government a lot more without all the damage and chaos. So is that it for Tesla? Well, it depends. If investors think that Tesla will do well in the future because it believes having Elon Musk's full attention will lead it to up the pace on innovation and up the number of new products, then you could make the case. But it will have to be new products that appeal to businesses and or MAGA voters. MAGA voters, in spite of Trump's endorsement, don't generally want to own electric cars, with or without fully autonomous driving. Can't imagine they'll be first in the queue for a Tesla service robot either. Add to that the fact that Chinese electric vehicle companies are currently out-innovating and outselling Tesla and putting more distance between them all the time as they do it. BYD's Seagull car became the first Chinese electric vehicle to win a World Car Award at the New York Auto Show this year, marking its arrival as the new dominant player on the scene. So it could be that the low point Elon Musk has just hit, his business is in the doldrums, his personal brand overwhelmingly toxic, his relationship with the government fraying at the edges, that is now his reality for the time being. Just as likely, this is now the mistake he will never be able to move on from. Indeed, if a widespread belief that his Doge team has been installing backdoor access into most of these government systems turns out to be true, could get a lot worse from here, because that would be the sort of thing that you would expect to get prosecuted hard. Be careful about talking about any of this in public, though. Recent analysis has shown that accounts that get into a spat with Elon Musk on Twitter, those accounts see their engagement on the platform just suddenly melt away like magic, which is weird given the whole free speech absolutism thing that Musk argues is the entire point of Twitter. A few months ago, I said Musk was on a journey of self-destruction, and then again a few days ago that he was getting close to the end of that journey. The trajectory certainly hasn't changed. This may be the end of all the good stuff right now. All he has left is the significant pain of all of those consequences coming home to roost. Elon Musk used to be an inspirational role model for our times. Instead, he has become a cautionary tale for the future generations.